They ended up not having me push. They rushed me into emergency surgery. It's pretty healthy as far as we knew. They said, yeah, he's not doing too good. He has a 50% chance of surviving. We need you to rush here and see him. All right, guys, welcome back to my channel. It is T Michelle here. So I wanted to come on and give you guys a birth story. I realize in a lot of my videos, especially the last few videos, I've talked about like Bryce's medical condition, short bowel syndrome, but I never gave you guys the full background story or how it happened. So like I said, Bryce has a condition called short bowel syndrome. Some people call it short gut syndrome, but that I think short bowel SBS is the medical term. So Bryce was born preterm. He was born at either 27 or 29 weeks. I don't remember which one. One night, it was actually the Friday after Thanksgiving. I went to the bathroom. I had some really heavy pressure down there, and so I got up and I went to the bathroom and I sat down on the toilet, of course, and all I saw was red stuff, obviously, a lot of it. So I woke my husband up and I told him that we had to go to the hospital immediately. At that time, I don't believe my mom was living with me, so we had to wait for her to get to the house to watch the kids. At that time, we had two kids, my son, my oldest son, Brayden, and my oldest daughter, Takia, who sadly passed away. I'll tell that story a different time, but she passed away in 2020. So we had two kids at the home, so my mom had to come and watch them. We rushed to the hospital. The hospital wasn't too far away. It was about 10, 15 minutes. So I got to the hospital, went to labor and delivery, told them what happened, and I already knew I was going to have a scheduled C-section because Brayden was a C-section, my oldest. Brayden is my oldest. Takia was my stepdaughter. Brayden was a C-section, so I already knew that Bryce was going to be a C-section. But when I got to the hospital, once they saw all the blood, they asked me if I could push, and I said, of course, yes, but they ended up not having me push. They rushed me into emergency surgery. I don't quite remember the actual birth. I know they took him out. He was almost 3 pounds. He was 2 pounds, 13 ounces. And he was, although he was small, he was pretty healthy at birth. He was healthy at birth. So, of course, with him being that small, he had to stay in the NICU. So he was born November 27th. I'm going to say the first 10 days of his life, he was pretty healthy as far as we knew. They were giving him my breast milk. Here, I'm not quite certain if they were giving him any formula at all. Like I said, I don't remember, but I do remember pumping out a lot of milk and storing it. So anytime I pumped, I did take breast milk to the hospital, but I don't know if they were actually giving him formula. So that's very important. But he had the little orange feeding tube in his nose. They were giving him breathing treatments, all the stuff they do for preterm babies in the NICU. Of course, when I was discharged from the hospital, I didn't go home with him, obviously. So I was going back and forth to the hospital every day to visit him. At that time, he was in the NICU at the hospital that he was born at. So on December 7th was the first time I was able to hold him. Now, I did all of the NICU precautions. I washed my hands. I didn't touch my phone. I don't remember if I wore gloves. I have to check. But I took all the precautions I could take with him being in the NICU and also holding him for the first time. So that was about early that day, December 7th. And then I'm going to say December 8th because it was early in the morning, December 8th. They called me early in the morning. It was about 2 a.m. and they said, you need to rush to the hospital and see Bryce because we don't know if he's going to make it. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, he was just healthy when I saw him earlier that day. So they said, yeah, he's not doing too good. He has a 50% chance of surviving. We need you to rush here and see him. So I woke my husband up. We, of course, had to wait for my mom to come watch the other two kids while we rushed to the hospital to see him. And at that time, they transferred him to another hospital, which was a pediatric hospital, and they had a better NICU there because the other hospital had a small NICU. This hospital was, of course, a children's hospital, and they were very advanced. The NICU was much bigger, so they transferred him there. And I remember walking into that NICU room. He was in the corner of the NICU. They had two NICU rooms at the time. I don't know if they still do. Actually, it was three NICU rooms, but they had A, B, and C. He was in A, which was like for the babies that were really, really ill. So I remember walking into that room. He was in the far corner of the room, like all the way in the corner, and they had him intubated. When I saw him, he was very swollen. He didn't look like the same baby that I saw the day before. So he looked very pale. His stomach was very distended. He just didn't look like the Bryce that was born. I'm going to try to insert pictures of when he was born and how small he was. Even though he was small and frail, he looked healthy. I don't think I have any pictures of him when he was like super, super sick. I don't think I took any pictures. So, yeah, they were like, he has a 50% chance of living. He has a 50% chance of, not living. And that it was very hard to see. It was very hard to experience. And so we just sat there, and I think, so since it was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, probably like later in the morning, like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I'm not really sure of the times, but we talked to a surgeon, and I want to say that his name was Dr. Drucker, if I'm not mistaken. If I have the names wrong, I'll have to go back and look through his medical records. I'm hoping I'm not giving the wrong doctor's name, but I'm almost certain it was Dr. Drucker. I remember it was his very first surgeon that did his very first surgery. So they did emergency surgery on him. I don't remember where the kids were. I want to say that they were in school. Yeah, because at that time they were back in school. So the kids were in school. We had a lot of support. My mom was there, my stepdad, my husband's parents, the daycare that two of my kids went to. The daycare owner came because she was supposed to keep Bryce. Who else was there? I believe my stepmom was there. We had a lot of support. Also, from my former job, two of my former bosses came, and at the time, okay, so let me backtrack. We were at the hospital at like 8 o'clock in the morning after we talked to the doctor. I called, at that time, it was my boss and my supervisor, and they rushed to the hospital to be by my side. I'll never forget that. And so at the time where they were going to do the emergency surgery and rush Bryce to the surgery room, operating room, my then boss and supervisor stayed by my side. So as they were rushing him back to the operating room because they had to go to the opposite side of the hospital, I just broke down. Like I think that this was the first time that I had like a really major breakdown in my life. I just couldn't do anything. Like I really couldn't move. I couldn't process what was going on. So my husband went over to the other side to the operating room where they were taking Bryce, and I kind of stayed behind to like collect myself. And so my manager and supervisor stayed with me until I was able to like compose myself. So they took him back to the emergency room. Not the emergency room. They took him back to the operating room. They did surgery, and they said he had something called necrotizing enterocolitis, which is short for, it's the long name for NEC, NEC. And it's basically a bad bacteria that gets into the intestines, and basically it breaks down the intestine. So he has all of his large intestine, but as far as I know, he only has 25 to 30% of his small intestine. And the small intestine, to my knowledge, is where you absorb your food and nutrients. And so he pretty much didn't have any of that. The surgeon said he tried to save whatever he could, but most of it was bad, so they had to take it out. So they did the best they could. And after that surgery, I broke down again. That's where all the family came, and they were there to because I broke down again, but they were there to console us. I don't recall my husband breaking down, but I know I did twice that day. In the NICU for 6 months, I want to say that he had quite a few surgeries while he was in the NICU. The first surgery, then they had something where they put like a tube in his belly to try to connect what was left. He had surgery to place his G tube. He had a surgery to place his initial central line, what he has is a central line, but at that time what he had was a Broviac line. Now he has a PIC line. But it's all a central line because it's going to the central venous system. I'm not a nurse. I just know certain terminology. So if I get it wrong, don't give me any issues in the comments, okay? But yeah, he had quite a few surgeries. They really didn't think he was gonna make it. We talked to social workers. We talked to the priest. They put us into a room. I want to say probably like either that same week or the week after, like they called us in this room. They wanted to know like what we want to do in certain situations. Do we want to resuscitate? Making final plans just in case. And I told them like at that moment, I can't make that decision. Like I don't want to have to think about, having to bury my child. That wasn't a decision that I could make right then and there at that moment. And so I never made that decision. I did tell them, if he did, have a situation where he stopped breathing or whatever the case is, please resuscitate him, like give him a fighting chance. And so they did. I don't remember like all of the details of him being in the NICU for those 6 months. I do know that I want to say for the first 5 months, he was in that NICU A room for a while. Then they transferred him over to NICU B once they saw that he was doing better. I don't recall when they started him on the TPN. I don't remember when they inserted the G tube. I just know that he had several surgeries. So after they saw that he was doing well, they transferred him over to like a step down of the NICU where he's almost ready to go home, but not quite ready to go home. And in that room, he was in that room by himself, but he did have the nurse come in and check on him every so often. I remember him being in that small room in March. So he was born in November, and he was transferred to that area in March. Yeah, it was like the end of March. I don't recall how long he was in the step down room. But yeah, he was there for a while, and then they finally transferred him over to like the area of the children's hospital where he doesn't need much supervision, and that's where he finally came home from. So he was in the NICU for about 5 months, and then they transferred him over to the other side of the hospital, the children's hospital, and he was there for like a month, maybe 3 weeks. I remember he came home in May, and after my maternity leave was over, which was the normal 6 weeks, I think I maybe took like 8 weeks. I would drop the kids off to school. Luckily, they were going to the same elementary school at the time. And I believe school started at 8 and I had to be to work at 9. So I would drop the kids off to school about 7:45, which was in the opposite direction of where I live. Then I would go all the way back to the hospital, which was in the same area where I live. I would go see Bryce for about 15-20 minutes. I didn't care how long I saw him, just as long as I saw him that day. And so I would see him for about 15-20 minutes, and then I would travel all the way back close to where the kids were at school. That's where my job was. And I would be to work by 9. And I did that pretty much every day until he came home. And I would do it twice a day. I would drop the kids off to school, go see him, go to work, get off work, go get the kids, drop them off home, and then go see Bryce at the hospital. I did that every day. I think there was one week where I was sick, and obviously I couldn't go to the NICU sick. That killed me. But I did it every day for nearly 6 months. Yeah. So it was very tough. I'm not gonna lie. It was very tough. And I remember a family member said that because she had a child that was in the NICU before and they didn't come home on any tubes, and she told me, like, I told my doctor, I don't want my kid coming home with any tubes, like, you have to fix it. And I'm like, first of all, that's not something you say to somebody who has a child in the NICU. You can't really help the circumstances the child has. Like, if I would have told the doctors, don't send my child home on tubes, the child could die. So I just accepted that that was Bryce's situation, and we had to do what we had to do. So the day he was discharged from the hospital, they had someone come in and train us on how to do the TPN, which is total I don't know how to pronounce the word. Total something nutrition. I'll put it on the screen. And how to do the G tube feeds. We were sent home with a lot of supplies. And that first night was crazy, like completely crazy, because we were nervous. We didn't want him to get super sick, but we managed. So then the next day, we had to hire an agency, a nursing agency. The first day, they sent this older lady. She could barely walk. She could barely see. We had like this step from our dining room to the den that you had to step down. And because she was partially blind, she couldn't see the steps. So she almost fell. Like, she really couldn't do anything. So I'm not really sure why they sent someone who couldn't do anything to care for a child who needs extra care, but they did. So I called them and I'm like, you have to send somebody else because this lady can barely do anything and we need somebody that can help. So they didn't send her anymore. They sent someone else. That first day, it was like we were trying to learn and the nurses were trying to learn how to do the G-tube feeds, how to do the TPN at the same time. And I'm like, how is it that we hired this nursing agency and they don't really know what to do? It was crazy. I was kind of pissed off. That first agency, I don't remember the name of it, but we got rid of them. Maybe we went to another agency, which we've been with this same agency since. So we've been with this same agency for 9 years. Went through a lot of nurses. I fired a lot of nurses. One lady just didn't care. The other lady, I had a camera in my house. When I had to go back to work and Bryce finally came home, I installed the camera and I caught this lady eating. Like, Bryce is sitting in the playpen crying and she's eating her lunch, watching the stories. I'm like, yeah, she gotta go. So she got fired. There was another nurse where she left to go get something to eat and she had my kids watching Bryce. She got fired. There are a lot of stories, but now we have two very good nurses that we've had pretty much since he was 6 months. I think one has been with him since he came home. yeah, once we switched to that second agency, we had one nurse that came and we've had her ever since. And then the other one, I think she came when Bryce was about maybe, I know it was before he turned a year. So we've had them a pretty long time. And it's been interesting. It's not easy. Like, I used to be embarrassed about like taking him out with all of his cords, and I was afraid like if people asked questions and what people would think. Like, it was a lifestyle change because you went from having two kids, two normal kids, to two kids and a sick kid that has all of these extra supplies. You gotta carry the feeding bag. You gotta carry the TPN bag because when he came home, he was on TPN for 24 hours. Well, I want to say 23 because I think they did give him 1 hour off. And then the feeds were continuous. So he was getting small feeds around the clock. So it was definitely a lifestyle change. Like, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. It's a difficult life, especially then. But we've since adjusted. He's not on TPN 24 hours anymore. He's on TPN for 8 hours. At one point, we got him down to 6 hours, but I guess they decided not to do 6 hours anymore. He does still get the G tube feeds. They're supplemental. He can eat by mouth. He can do everything a normal kid can do, except he has a G tube and a central line. He's in a regular classroom. He does have a medical 504 plan because his condition will make him poop a lot and he can't really hold. I think he's learned to hold it. So I think he only uses the bathroom like 2 times a day at school. But in general, he'll go to the bathroom like 4 or 5 times. That's just pooping. And it's going to be diarrhea like, unfortunately. So the reason he has the TPN, the central line, is because he's not absorbing what he's eating. So the TPN is giving him the nutrients that he needs. We tested him off of TPN for 1 year. And honestly, he was super frail. He looked like a skeleton. I know he has to eat a certain diet and eat certain foods so he can hold what he's eating, but he doesn't understand, like, you can't just eat a lot of junk. You can't eat the same things that normal kids do. So because he doesn't understand that, he has the central line. I think once he get older and he understands like he has to eat a certain diet to maintain without having the central line, I think it'll be better for him. But right now he just simply doesn't understand. I'm trying to see if I'm leaving anything out. I don't get a lot of questions anymore because when we do go out, we don't go out with anything. Like the TPN he gets overnight, the feeds, it's not on a schedule. It's pretty much like when we want to give it to him, as long as it's 3 times a day. So the school doesn't do anything. They don't give him any medications. They don't give him any G-tube feeds. They don't even touch anything that's going on with him at school. They don't touch anything that's going on with him at school. They just know that he has to use the bathroom when he needs to, and they know that he needs to eat a snack during school to stay so that he doesn't become hypoglycemic. He supposed to drink Gatorade. He stopped liking Gatorade. I'm not really sure why, but he does drink a lot of water and snacks at school. Another thing that annoys me is I get that a lot of people don't understand, but I feel like, especially the people who have been in my life for a very long time since birth, it's not their job to understand Bryce's condition. But I get the same question all the time, like, will he need to have this forever? Can they do something so that he doesn't get an infection? Like, I don't know, but it bothers me because I think I've explained it multiple times, but I have to understand that this is not everybody's life. This is my life, that we have to deal with it. But it's like when they say, well, he have to have that thing forever, I get bothered by that. I'm not really sure why, but I do. And I have to explain to people, like, this is just not something that they can just take out and he'll survive. Like, he probably won't survive without it. Like, we've tried it. That's why we go to labs every week, so they can monitor his labs and make sure nothing's out of whack. We have to be super clean. Like whenever he goes in whenever he gets a fever, whether I think he has a cold or not, I'm taking him to the hospital. Especially when he says he has the chills. Like most likely when he says he has the chills and he has a fever, he's gonna have a line infection. Some are more severe than others. Like I think in 2017 he became septic, which was really scary because we thought we at that point we thought he was gonna pass too. But he came out of that obviously. That was another tough one for me. I broke down there too. How did I get there? But yeah, people don't understand the dynamics of the illness and they just think like it's curable. It's not really curable. It's survivable. There are precautions that we can take so that he doesn't get line infections and he doesn't get hypoglycemic. Like there's certain things that we do. He's on several medications. There's just a lot to deal with. Like we have two DME companies, durable medical supply companies, durable medical equipment. One medical equipment company, they deliver the tube fees, the tube supplies and things like that. Then we have another company that delivers the TPN and lipids. Like, it's not easy. But I think that because I've been going through this for 9 years, it's normal for me. This is our life. Like this this is our life. I think it's part of the reason why I don't let certain things bother me. Like I don't really let a lot of things get under my skin. And that's because of this one situation. Like this really broke me down. It really broke me down. And if I can survive this, I know that I can survive anything. And because he's going through this and he's so strong, then I know I have to be strong. So yeah, that's basically our life. That's our situation. That's Bryce's story. You guys might have some comments. If you do, drop them down in the comment area, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. But basically it. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the video and subscribing to the channel. I appreciate all the love and support so far, and I will see you guys in the next video.